Good day, everyone, and good day to you, Miss Ria. We are here to present the conservatism topic, which be assigned to us to discuss it to you, and it is our pleasure to briefly explain it to each and every one of you. So, in this topic, it has three objectives, and the first objective is the etymology, which includes the origin and the history of conservatism, and that will be discussing by my co-group mates, which is Miss Eleria Jacel and Miss Cidro Jessabelle. And the second part of it, objectives, is the various types of conservatism, which will be discussing by Jessabelle Cidro again. And the last objectives of conservatism is the political ideology of United States of America and the Europe country, and I will be tackling about that. So later on, we will discussing. You will be enlightened what is conservatism. So let's go.
I'm going to discuss about the etymology or the origin of the word conservatism. Conservatism was taken from the Latin word conservare or conservare. So it means is to retain, to keep guard, or to observe. Now let's talk about the definition of the conservatism. So conservatism is a political and social philosophy that is promoting traditional and social constitution. So conservatism was retaining traditional and social constitution. Conservatives seek to prevent a reach of institution that such as religion, parliamentary government, and properties rights with the aim of emphasizing social stability and continuity. So Ed Ed Edmund Brooke, he is an Anglo-Irish political. He served in the conservatism in the Great Britain and is generally viewed as a philosophically founder of the modern conservatism. So, in conservatism, there are conservative policies. So, in conservative policies, there's a history of conservative policies being forced by those who are benefits from tradition, privilege, and power. Um, these are often enshrined our within that tradition. So, does all this means it depends on traditions you want to conserve. Most people nowadays, as a conservatism basically a public relation campaign that aim at persuading them to lay down their capacity from rational thought. Conservatism frequently attempts to destroy our thoughts, for example, by using languages in ways that stand just out of reach of rational debate or rebuttal. So that's the negative effect of conservatism. This destruction of reason requires the destruction of language. It is an underlying notion of conservative politics. It is that the words and phrases of a language are likely territory and welfare. It is owned and controlled by one side or the another. One of the central goals of conservatism, as for example, with the new Gingrich list of word, I get it in internet. Um, is to take control of every word and phrases in English language. So conservatism destroy the language. So, overall, conservatism is a political and social philosophy that promotes retaining traditional and social institutions. So, it promotes retaining traditional social institution. Tingin mo.
Hi, I am Jessabelle Eleria, and I will discuss to you about conservatism, or the brief history of conservatism. According to its brief history, conservatism is a political doctrine that emphasizes the value of traditional institutions and practices. And also, conservatism is a preference for the historically inherited rather than the abstract and ideal. This preference has traditionally rested on an organic conception of society. That is, on the belief that society is not merely loose collection of individuals but a living organism comprising closely connected, interdependent members. Government's responsibility is to be the servant, not the master, of existing ways of life, and politicians must therefore resist the temptation to transform society and politics. This suspicion of government activism distinguishes conservatism not only from radical forms of political thought but also from liberalism, which is modernizing anti-traditionalist movement dedicated to correcting the evils and abuses resulting from the misuse of social and political power. Conservatism must also be distinguished from the reactionary outlook, which favors the restoration of the previous and usually outmoded and political or social order. Yes. It was not until the 18th century, in reaction to the upheavals of the French Revolution on 1789, that conservatism began to develop as a distinct political attitude and movement. The term conservative was introduced after 1815 by supporters of the newly restored Bourbon monarchy in France. In 1880, no, in 1830, the British politician and writer John Wilson Crocker used the term to describe the British Tory party. And John C. Calhoun, an ardent defender of states' rights in the United States, adopted it soon afterward. The originator of modern, articulated conservatism, though he never used the term himself, is generally acknowledged to be the British parliamentarian and political writer Edmund Burke, whose reflections on the Revolution in France 1790 was a forceful expression of conservatives' rejection of the French Revolution for counter-revolutionary theorists in the 19th century. For Burke and other pro-parliamentarian conservatives, the violent, untraditional, and uprooting methods of the revolution outweighed and corrupted its liberating ideals. The general revolution against the violent course of the revolution provided conservatives with an opportunity to restore pre-revolutionary traditions, and several branches of conservative philosophy soon to develop. These are the following variants of conservatism. Number 1. Liberal conservatism is a variant of conservatism that combines conservative values and policies with classical liberal stances. Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consent of the governed, and equality before the law. Liberals espouse a wide array of views depending on their understanding of these principles, but they generally support free markets, free trade, limited government, individual rights, including civil rights and human rights, capitalism, democracy, secularism, gender equality, racial equality, internationalism, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion. Yellow is the political color most commonly associated with liberalism. Example of this is it is based on the fundamental belief in individual freedom. It is highly individualistic in orientation. It is also emphasizes equality of opportunity. It has social contract. And lastly, it has high regard for pluralism and diversity for complementary rather than conflict. Number 2, libertarian conservatism. It describes certain political ideologies within the United States and Canada which combine libertarian economic issues with aspects of conservatism. Libertarians seek to maximize autonomy and political freedom, emphasizing free association, freedom of choice, individualism, and voluntary association, skepticism of authority and state power. But libertarians diverge on the scope of their opposition to existing economic and political systems. Example of these are libertarians talk about the freedom that comes from financial independence, and they talk about freedom from oppression by sources other than the state. Some libertarians see the fight for liberty in politics. They envision a world where people are free to experiment with different ways of living, free to try new ideas that might just be crazy enough to work. And number 3, fiscal conservatism is the economic philosophy of prudence in government spending and debt. About fiscal conservatism is a political and economic philosophy regarding fiscal policy and fiscal responsibility, advocating low taxes, reduced government spending, and minimal government debt. Example of these are fiscal conservatism is the economic philosophy of prudence in government spending and debt. Fiscal conservative is a political position, primarily in the United States, that calls for lower levels of public spending, lower taxes, and lower government debt. Fiscal conservatives oppose unnecessary government expenditures, deficits, and government debt. They support balanced budgets.
National conservatism, it is heavily oriented towards the traditional family and social stability. So it is in favor of limiting immigration. National conservatives can be distinguished from economic conservatives, or from the free market economic policies and the regulation of physical conservatism are the main priorities. So, national conservatism concentrates more on the national interest, that standard conservatism, and it holds cultural and ethnical identity. For example, national conservatives ay they supporting maintaining the national sovereignty over the globalism. They also support the social conservatism and traditional values, particularly with regard to religion, culture, and ethnicity. Um, in Europe, and if in Europe, they are strongly Eurosceptic. Yes. Um, they do not have national conservatives. They do not have any common stance of economic policy. Likely due to them they having less interest in area, and they can range anywhere between the socialist economics and the free market. Um, Next is cultural conservatism. In cultural conservatism, it is the preservation of the heritage of one nation or the shared culture that is not defined by national boundaries. In social conservatism, they first on a conservatives are focused first and foremost on society. Specifically, conservatives, not cultural conservatives, they seek to preserve what they see as a traditional values or of their society. Conservative cultural conservatives goal is to prevent social changes from undermining these values, and they thereby to prevent the fundamental change of the society itself. So for them to do this, they social conservatives draw from a number of tactics that range from private advocacy and um, protest protest to the use of the federal government to enforce traditional values and limit the change. So one big traditional value supported by social conservatism is marriage and family. But when according to them, when they talk about the family and marriage, it doesn't just mean that um conservat conservatives support the concept of marriage and families. These but they support very specific view of what marriage and family should look like. In their minds, these are the traditional structure upon which their society is built. Kasi nga, di ba? They focus on values and tradition. So, in the modern world, social conservatism is look like heterosexual union. Um, it is blessed by a religious institution composed of biological children. Homosexual marriage, ho- homosexual marriage, homosexual adoption of children, and non-married coupling, mixed families, single parenting, and abortion is therefore seen as challenge to traditional social order. Um, conservatives fight against these changes. As we talk about, as we talk, um, as I said later, conservatism is um, promote the retaining of traditional social institutions. So cultural social conservatives they threatened of these challenges, that they threaten the challenges that the perceived status quo, and so they support laws designed to prevent or to restrict them. Kasi nga 'di ba, they promoting retaining. So they support the laws that is make to prevent that challenges. So lastly is the cultural conservatism. Social conservatism is a principally seek to apply the techniques of particular religions to politics, sometimes by merely proclaiming the value of those teaching, and at other times by having those teaching influences laws. Um, Cultural conservatives are concerned with threats to cultural tradition and the established status quo within the culture. So it isn't the same. There's a question. So the question is, isn't the same thing as social conservatism? So, not really. Social conservatism deals with social values, while the cultural conservatism is more interested in the heritage, tradition that from basis of the national culture. So, cultural conservatives, um, I'm for cultural conservatives, the government should be active in preserving the cultural tradition of a nation and should work to restrict ideas they see as a threat in those tradition. Um, like great example of this, the languages, as I said later. Conservatism is destroy their language. So cultural conservatives are threatened by this. Many cultures embrace the concept of national language, and this can be a significant part of what it means belong to that culture. Could An example of this, English speak English, the Spanish speak Spanish, the Italian speaks Italian, Filipino speak Tagalog, like that. Cultural conservatives argue that the government should not work only to advance the use of the language, but should also prevent use another language. Ah. So in religious conservatism, they seek to apply the techniques of particular religion to politics. Sometimes by merely proclaiming the value of those teaching, and at other times by having those teaching influence laws. So that's the definition of religious conservatism. So that's all. Thank you.
So now let's go to the political ideology of United States of America. So the Democrats are more to the left in the United States of America, while the Republicans are more to the right. So let's go liberal. So when we talk about the social, I will explain it. So para mas clear. So pag-uusapan natin ang social, ang view ng liberal pagdating sa abortion, they view abortion as a reproductive issues. So dito parang woman has a right to choose because sa kanya yung katawan. May right siya kung i-abortion niya yung baby. While the conservatives, they address these issues as life issues because it pertains to developing a life, and And life has a right to live. Everyone has a rights, di ba? So, ang view ng conservative dito is pro-life sila, while the liberal is pro-choice. So, when we talk about the affirmative action naman, ang liberal is in favor with this because they believe so na race should be considered a factor when it comes to social equality in order to ease the discrimination, while the conservative, they are against with the affirmation action, because they do not want to be a race factor. So ayun, in affirmative action kasi these issues address the inequality today or wrongdoings of the past or the discriminations in that country. So when we talk about the social in conservatism, mas pinapreserve nila ang culture, yung naging tradition nila, while in liberal, may sarili talaga silang pinapaniwalaan. So, in other words, not all Democrats has a same perspective, has the same opinion. Kung kunwari, liberal ako, hindi porket liberal ako, ayun din yung yung magiging view ko kasi liberal din siya. Hindi pwedeng magiging ganun. So, ano pa rin siya? Depende pa rin yan because everyone has a opinion, di ba? So, now, let's talk about in social, when we talk about in society. Gun, liberals saw it as another very contentious issues. So, in liberal, they will often cite guns as a major factor in a lot of crimes, like shooting in US, yes. And they would tend to be pro-gun control, while in conservatism, it is not a gun issue for them. There's other issue at play, so they would be pro-gun rights here, like unlike sa liberal, they are pro-gun control, while in conservative, they are pro-gun rights. So, parang gusto nilang bigyan ng rights yung kapag may hawak ka ng baril, while in liberal, parang imamanage yung pagko-control ng baril. So, ayun. When we talk about economics naman, sa political ideology ng US, ang liberal, pag-uusapang taxes, at saka spending or regulation, okay sila. Kasi, especially on rich, mga mayayamang tao, parang wala silang problema kung mataas ang taxes, okay lang sa kanila. While in conservatism, they are not okay with the taxes, they are not okay with the higher taxes. So when we talk about the military naman, the liberal is likely to want a military, but they just want a base services, just like basic military. Kapag normal lang, kapag nakakita sila ng may pumasok sa boundary nila, expected na nila na paglalaban sila na yaan yung rights nila. While the conservatism, sinasabi nila na, hey, even when we are in peace, while we haven't crossed over borders in a long time, hindi pwedeng pumirme. So, they want a strong and muscular military. Yeah, and they make argument that the strong military wouldn't even wanna think about messing with you because yun nga, malakas ka so walang may magtatangkang lumaban sa'yo. Ayan yung paniniwala ng conservatism when it comes to military. Yeah. So, in additional, The philosopher in history na may political ideology when it comes to conservatism is Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan. Yeah, read mo yan. Please read the Leviathan of Thomas Hobbes. So now let's go back in political ideology of Europe country. Conservatism is like patriotism. Left and right wing ang iikot dito sa conservatism. And this term refers used in ideology context during French Revolution on 18th century. Yeah. So the difference between left and right wings, it is fundamentally comes down to the balance between individuality and government power. So when we talk about the left side, the left wing, the left strive for a equal society and believe that the state should play substantial role at people's life, and this means increase of regulation in businesses and higher taxes on a rip. The left are tend for homo-progressive views, and they often oppose death penalty and yet supporting the same-sex marriage and human rights abortion. They are more in separation of church and state. Yeah. So economically speaking, they use Keynesian approach to avoid economic recessions. So I will tell the European parties of the left, which are the communist, social, Democrats or socialist, new left parties, and the Greens. So the other side, on the other hand, the right wing. The right wing, they believe the level of social inequality is inevitable, so that the government should have a limited role in people's life and people's businesses. So, hindi sila nakikipag-meddle when it comes to personal issue ata. So, the right is homo-traditional, and they often oppose the left. They often oppose which the left support. It's like a same-sex marriage and human rights abortion. Yeah. So, tutol sila doon. They more preserve tradition and culture rather than adopting a new culture. Unlike sa liberal kasi, more on changes sila. So, economically speaking, again, in right wing, the right can be often used the new classical approach, which is laissez-faire policy, and it translated into leave things alone, which means less regulation to increase innovation, and then lowering taxes in order to increase the growth. Yun. So, parang ayaw nilang tinataasan yung taxes para mas malaki yung growth, yung income pagdating sa economy nila. So, again, this is the stereotypical views. Not at all, and not everyone will be the same view when it comes to political parties and political ideology. I can be either liberal when it comes to economics, and I can be conservatism when it comes to homo-traditional views. So, ayoko ng perspective ng liberal, and pupunta ako dun sa conservatism, dun sa right. Yeah. So, that's the end of our discussion. So wait, in additional pala, in 1960 sa US, Nixon, si Nixon ay siya ang may history pagdating sa conservatism at saka si Reagan. But I'm not mistaken, conservatism believed that promote freedom. They couldn't promote freedom and they cannot solve problems, so that liberal government should have to be stopped. Ayun daw yung kailangan nilang mapatigil. Ayan ang paniniwala ng conservatism na kailangan mapastop ang liberal kasi ayan daw yung nagkakos ng problem. Yeah. Because conservatism promotes more freedom than liberal. That's all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.